Good morning, all you beautiful people. I'm gonna admit it, I slept in a little bit and I'm getting a little bit of a late start today. But what we're doing today is something that's pretty important, and really everybody who's got a lifted Jeep should know this. I'm sorry for the little bit of a clickbait title, but realistically, if you drive a lifted JK, what we're about to do today is gonna be very, very important. But naturally, before I get started with anything, I gotta make a Wawa run. Ready to go now? You done napping?
No.
Alright, so we're over here at Austin, so we're going to go underneath the Jeep and we're going to show you exactly what we're going to be doing today, because this is one of those things that every time somebody lifts a Jeep, specifically the JKs, they tend to forget about. So, and this is really important because it kind of involves you stopping. Alright, so underneath the Jeep here, this is in the rear of the Jeep. You can see that my brake lines here don't really have a whole lot of slack to them. So if I were to go off-road and articulate it all, these would stretch probably, I don't know, maybe at even a couple inches of down travel. So I have some lines up in the Jeep and some over there next to Austin, who is under there taking a nap. But I have some extended lines. They're 6-inch extended lines. So we're going to be installing those in the front and the rear just to help me be able to actually drive this thing off-road. So what are we doing first?
So first we're going to remove the old brake lines, which are mounted on the frame on these relocation brackets. And then they come down to the axle just below the lower coil spring bucket, and then they go back up to the caliper. I believe the new brake lines do not include the bracket that is holding it to the lower spring buckets, so we're going to ditch that system and have them kind of hang out in space, which should give some extra articulation as well. The ABS wire is the other concerning item here, as you kind of need that in wet weather, and we're gonna end up zip tying that to the brake line to keep it tucked out of the way so it doesn't get caught up in anything.
First step here to get this started,
we're gonna take a 10mm socket and remove this bracket here on the coil spring perch, and then we'll end up taking off the same bracket up top, the upper brake line mount, and then off of the caliper.
And realistically, you don't even need to jack the Jeep up into the air. You can actually do it with the vehicle already on the ground, which is exactly what we're doing, because we're both feeling kind of lazy today. So we're just going to go ahead and do it without taking the wheels off. If you take the wheels off, it makes it a little bit easier. But you know, again, that's a little too much effort for both of us today.
First, we're going to go ahead and remove this bolt here. It's 10mm. After you crack it loose, it should be just hand tight. Then you're going to pull the bracket forward or rearward on the vehicle and slide it out. There's a little tab over here that locks in place over here. Pop all your ABS lines off this thing. Using a pair of dikes, trim these two zip tie like mounts so that way you can remove the brake line fully.
So realistically, this job is pretty simple. You only need a few parts and some basic tools to get it done. The main thing that you're going to need is some extended brake lines. I got mine from Northridge. I think the kit was like $100 maybe, and they come with extended front and rear brake lines. And then we also got some brake cleaner and some brake fluid. We want the DOT3 brake fluid, and we want the non-flammable, or actually we want the flammable kind of brake cleaner, as that actually does stuff. So we have all that sitting right there. Austin's under there getting started, and so let's show you what he's doing. This is already my second monster today, which kind of, you know, describes how our day is going, which is funny because neither one of us drank last night.
I would do anything just to get you back again. I would do anything at all. I know I'm not innocent, you deserve a better man, but let me just hold your hand once more.
This bracket's going to go on the frame in the original mounting hole. Now before you hook up the brake line, you have to pass this through and then take this bracket here with the bow facing upward, so it's like this, and push it on. You really have to hammer it on, but for argument's sake it's there, until it locks into these little flats, and that'll hold it in place before you put the brake line back in.
right, so we got the front done on both sides. As you can see, we got this bracket here, and then the lines come down, go behind the shock, down here, and I have everything zip tied. I'm gonna trim those in a little bit. I have some flush cuts back at home that I'll use to trim those. But yeah, so the front is done, and we are moving on to the back. So back here, the lines, as you can see, the lines are already, I mean, he's got the one side off, but there wasn't a whole lot of travel in that line. And
Probably
you know,
about 4.5, maybe,
yeah, 4
maybe 5
inches, 4 or 5 inches of down travel, which is really not a whole lot, especially when you're crawling over rocks and stuff. So, but the rear is definitely going to be easier. So we're jumping into that now. The brake lines from the factory do mount right there. I had them disconnected because of that limited down travel, so it gave me a little bit more space. I would not recommend doing that, but we're going to go back to the factory mounting location once we get these extended lines on, and I'll kind of show you what the extended lines look like in comparison to the factory lines once we get the factory lines off. Difference between the two lines, as you can see, the new line is a couple inches longer, but it's also going to put a different bracket up top. Let me actually show you that. It's going to put a different bracket up top, which is going to give it even more travel down. But you can see that there's, you know, quite a difference in the length, which is going to give me all the down travel that I need. So the old brake line here, you can see, has copper washers on either side. The new kit does come with the copper washers. They're inside this bag. Hopefully I don't lose them. But it does come with new copper washers, and something you want to make sure on both the front and the rear lines is you want to make sure that you have a copper washer on both sides of the line. So majestic. Yeah. So like I mentioned before, that new bracket goes on, and that clip holds it just like it did on the front, and then you just tighten your brake line down up top, and then you're going to do the same thing down here at the bottom on the caliper. And again, remember those two bronze washers on either side. My lines have plenty of travel. Won't have any issues really when I'm out on the trails. So now our next step is to bleed the system, and Austin is telling me that he has a special method for bleeding the system. You want to kind of explain that a little bit, or you just want to show everybody?
So when you're typically bleeding a system with two people, you have one person at the brake caliper or drum, wheel cylinder, whatever you might have set up, and somebody pumps the pedal 10 times and holds it, and then the other person cracks it open and relieves the pressure. The alternative that I prefer to use is using clear plastic tubing, fitting it over the end of these bleeder valves, and then routing them above where you're bleeding to a cup, so that way you can get fluid to run upwards and push all of the air out. It means you can bleed all four at one time and with one person. It's super simple and easy to do.
All right, so you're putting the hose in the cup just to give it somewhere for the fluid to go to. Yeah.
Yep, and then pushing the hose over the end of the brake lead screw.
Let me get under there and show that.
Right over top of that. And then tucking this somewhere up, so that way as air comes up, it doesn't go back down.
Right, yeah.
Into the caliper.
So the vehicle is not on, but we're going to go ahead and pump the brakes. We got cups at all four corners. So this is going to go right to the floor. There it goes, all the way to the ground. Yep.
Eventually.
Whoa, green spider. That freaked me out. Little green spider. See ya. All right, so once you've bled the system and the brakes feel stiff again, that's really all you got to do. Everything is done. So we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna clean up here. Austin and I both have dates tonight, so we're gonna go ahead and clean up, take showers, put everything away. Not necessarily in that order.
Wait, you're taking a shower?
Yeah, I feel like that's probably a good thing. You might want to do that, because I'm kind of stanky.
All right, good call.
Alright guys, so once we're done wrapping up here, that'll do it. I will see you guys in the next video. I'm not exactly sure what we're doing. We got a whole bunch of stuff planned. So I will see you guys.
Arms. What?
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 What? What?